Hello and welcome to debateIQ. I'm Vishwa Sadashivan. This is part 2 of the discussion on the topic Understanding LKY. Previously, in part 1, we discussed the character traits and dislikes and likes of Kuan Yew and the complexity of his personality and how it came to bear on the way he worked, interacted with people, and his leadership. In part 2 today, we will be discussing or focusing on his policies and initiatives, as well as his principles of government. And these were the things that undergirded many of the programs and schemes that he introduced over the years. There were several tough and unwavering principles of governance that Mr. Kuan Yew was known for: democracy, pragmatism, meritocracy, multiracialism, and of course, incorruptibility. Now, from time to time, some of these principles in implementation appear to have inherent contradictions, at least for some people. For example, between democracy and pragmatism, between pragmatism and multiculturalism or multiracialism. Then there were several controversial policies that had eyebrows raised, such as the caning of overstayers, graduate mothers scheme, special assistance program or SAP schools, Newspaper and Printing Presses Act, and the Abortion Act, which is considered one of the most liberal abortion acts in the world. It is important for us to address some of these apparent contradictions and also ask why some of these controversial policies were introduced by a man known for his consistency and deep belief in integrity and in doing the right thing. It begs the question, in LKY's mind, were these contradictions? Was doing the right thing for Singapore the same as doing the right thing for all Singaporeans? For him, did the desired end result always justify the means? To answer these questions and to better understand LKY, we have on the panel, again, Joseph Conceicao, MP for Katong from 1968 to 1984 and former ambassador to Russia and Indonesia, Mr. Yatiman, Yusof, former MP and senior parliamentary secretary, Seng, former nominated member of parliament and presently chairman, Singapore Business Federation and immediate past president of the Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and of course, last but not least, Chandramohan Nair, a practicing lawyer who was also a former nominated member of parliament and president of the Law Society of Singapore. Gentlemen, welcome. We also have a studio audience comprising Singaporeans from all walks of life who are keenly interested to deepen their understanding of Singapore's founding Prime Minister who passed away on the 23rd of last month. Thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. Let me kick off this discussion by posing a question to the panel. It is about LKY's view of democracy. In 1955, as an opposition leader, he said this, and I quote him, "If you believe in democracy, you must believe in it unconditionally. If you believe that men should be free, then they should have the right of free association, of free speech, of free publication. Then no law should permit those democratic processes to be set at naught." 31 years later, in 1986, during the National Day rally, as Prime Minister, LKY said, and I quote him, "What are our priorities? First, the welfare, the survival of the people. Then, democratic norms and processes which from time to time we have to suspend." So Yatiman, as a former parliamentary secretary, senior parliamentary secretary, and someone who would have had sufficient discussions with the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, how would you explain this? I mean, does this point to a major contradiction, or is it a reality that he was adapting to changed circumstances and being pragmatic? How would you respond to this?
I would sum it up by saying that there are three words: democracy, pragmatism, and reality. To begin with, Singapore is not a natural nation. It is unusual. In fact, it's not supposed to exist. But somehow, thrown into the wilderness, we build a nation out of it. So what is considered as a norm in democracy can be influenced by the reality of the circumstances and pragmatism policy. Let me give you an example. Singapore has always been likened as a patrol boat compared to India, which is like an aircraft carrier. If there is a big fire in one part of the aircraft carrier, which is segmented, the whole aircraft carrier would still remain afloat and it would still be able to steer to the direction. Singapore is a pity, a patrol boat, just one hole. The whole boat will sink. This is the fundamental consideration that make people to think that democracy as applied in India, in America, in Europe, will have to be tweaked to fit into the little boat that is floating in the rough sea. So that being the situation, I think from my experience...
But in 1955, we were also a little boat.
In 1955, we were a little boat hoping to latch into Malaysia, which is a bigger unit with a big hinterland, creating the norms where the exercise of democracy could be done in a manner that is acceptable. But post 1965 had changed that, and I think when you talk about survival of small country, I think you have to talk about what makes the small country be able to face challenges worldwide.
Okay.
And this requires adjustment to the policies.
So your view is that he was not shifting his view necessarily, but he was adapting to changed circumstances. Chandra, I see you looking a bit unsettled.
Well, if you look at it legally, the Constitution of Singapore, we have what is known as fundamental liberties, and those that you've just mentioned about freedom of religion, freedom to form association, freedom of free speech, etc. is all entrenched in the Constitution. And if I'm not wrong, it is taken actually from India and USA. We are good at copying and adapting, and it has been done. But I think as the years went, modifications have taken place. See, there's freedom, however. So you find, like, if you want to go to speaker's corner and things like that, you have certain restrictions, So I think democracy, yes, but not in the true sense of the word. It's modified democracy to adapt to local circumstances. It has served us well. At the same time, I think it has brought about a negativity in people wanting to form NGOs and wanting to be proactive and having the power and the strength to strengthen the nation. So I think that's one of the things on reflection, perhaps, if it had been done in a more liberal way, I think citizens would have actually come forward and be more active in these things. So I think to me, I'm quite a liberal person. I think it's a miss, but it's never too late. I think hopefully in the years to come, we would do better. No doubt democracy is important. You need not follow exactly what the other democracies are doing, but I think we can do more. And I think we must have trust in our citizenry. And today we have citizens who are very well experienced, they are intelligent, and they want a change also. So I think it's important.
That's today. But if you talk about when LKY was very much in power, right? I mean, very much until 1990, and then of course, even as senior minister, he had some measure of influence. Was there a change you saw at that point in time, in the latter years of him being in power? Did you all see a shift? Was he the same person he was in 1965 when he was Prime Minister in the late 80s, even in the 90s? Was he the same person? Did he adapt? Did he start opening up?
I think I remember something he said, that there can be only one A team because there's not enough people here in Singapore to form an alternative A team to contest directly in Parliament. So perhaps that was something that drove him to say that, democracy can stay, but not in the sense that we see in India and America. But in a way, I feel that maybe for the younger generation, we see more examples from other countries, and it just feels a bit like, you know, a parent trying to clamp down. I know best for you, but just listen to me. You know, I know best. I know better than you do.
Kenny?
I think it's a growing pain kind of thing. Initial part, everybody's supposed to be like child. You need the parents to guide us. But you know, Goh Chok Tong came in and gave us a lot of liberty to express and all things. So I think it's like, you know, at certain period of time, you need certain kind of leadership actually to bring us forward. So there's nothing wrong about, you know, what he did, you know, when he was PM. He says something that, you know, whatever I do is for the nations, and a lot of policies, he still believes in that. But on the high side, he hopes he can execute it in a very different way. You see, policy still intact, but maybe can execute it in a more humane manner or something like that. You know
and you're right, because he, for example, when he talked about mother tongue policy, right, he made that specific statement, right? He said, will I change the policy? No. But will I change the way the policy was implemented? Yes. You know, remember when he admitted that not everybody can master multiple languages the same way, right? And even there, he equated that with IQ. You know, he did say someone with a lower IQ may have a problem mastering multiple languages, right? So take your point. Bernard, were you going to say something?
No,
Microphone?
I agree.
Hold.
I agree with this point. I mean, if you look at Singapore over the last 50 years, I mean, coming from a mixed bag of people to becoming a nation, I think there are phases, right? And really, what struck me is that he was clear. He wanted to build this place and make sure we all had a future. I mean, one of the policies which is most controversial in my mind was graduate mother policy. My wife and I are graduates. We would have benefited from it, but we were opposed to it. But I saw the logic of what he was trying to do. He wanted greater talent for this place. But I thought where he didn't get it right was he didn't see that this would divide a people that he was trying to unite.
Absolutely.
But eventually he saw it, and he gave in, and he did away with that.
Yeah, but the thing is, the impulses, just in case, just for those of us who may not be familiar with the Graduate Mothers scheme, it had two parts. First part is that if you are a graduate and a mother of 3 children before the age of 28, you get a $10,000 tax rebate every year. And on the other hand, if you don't have X number of O-level passes, you will be given $10,000 not to have another child after your first child or second child, I believe. That's broadly the scheme. Obviously, the second part of the scheme is a lot more controversial, right? Now, it's pragmatic. It is about wanting, but it's based on the assumption that, number one, that intelligence is measured by academic grades, right? Because that's the yardstick. And number two, an intelligent mother, not father, an intelligent mother will give birth, has a much higher chance of giving birth to an intelligent child. That's the assumption. So if that is the assumption, then we'll have, therefore, a lot more intelligent children who'll go to Cambridge and do well, right? But now we're talking about the top universities, of course, NUS, you know. So the question here is, that's his thinking. Now, was he in a position, or did he allow for that theory to be sufficiently stress tested? So every one of us can have a theory or hypothesis based on our own ideology, based on our reading and exposure. But when you're making a decision on behalf of the entire country and entering into people's private lives decisions about having a second child, third child, the question I guess that people are asking is, Was it tested? Would he bounce off these things before it's implemented?
I think he did. I think in one of the lunches we had, he was a firm believer in
Eugenics.
on matters pertaining to gene.
Yeah.
Genes.
Then I said that, and he was saying this, you know, if you look at the Olympic championship, those who win the 100 meters are always the Negroes. Black people who has a motto to run faster and quicker. They have the build to run. But when it comes to golf, at that time, we have the Taiwanese, American, and European controlling the golf scene. There was no black who can play golf very well. Then towards the later part, when Tiger Woods came, I said, what happened to Tiger Woods?
There's half
Well,
black.
he has a mix.
But I
So
think
fundamentally, he believes in that. But I think the underside of this policy is not the reward that the graduate mothers are getting in terms of 10,000 incentive, but the counter policy where those who are lowly educated from poor family will have to go through ligation or sterilization. So I think
Not have to go through, but you are incentivized if you go through.
you are given incentive to go through ligation or sterilization, and there's carrot dangled to you so that you can get some money and get priority for HDB flats. I think the policy cut both ways, but as an unpopular policy,
Right.
tested by time, I think he later realized that this policy did not work.
Pulled out.
Yeah?
Yes.
So
I think he was.
Yes. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, I think just now you mentioned that the assumptions, right? I think that's a very dangerous point, right? That's very, very dangerous because it's one man's assumptions, right? Had we been a little bit more deliberative, I think this could have been open for debate, right? I think the other point about, that the graduate mother scheme, the part 1, part 2, is that incentivizing is all very pragmatic. Then we sort of reduce the person to just a digit, just a numbers, just an economic entity, a unit, right? And that disregard the whole idea of ethics, the whole idea of what being a human is.
Right. Subra, before I come to you, I just want to ask Rupini, sorry. You are going to be a medical student.
Yeah.
What are your views about this? And you did some research in precisely this area, right?
Yes, I did. So, which is why I found it really hard to, knowing this man to be someone who's very logical, would have done his research, and to be very ruthless in what he said and what he believed. I thought it was entirely inaccurate to say that your intelligence and your IQ, what you are, whether or not you graduate from university, is based on your parents' mental capacities as well. Because, that just diminishes, or rather takes away credits from experts all over the world debating, the whole nurture versus nature idea. So perhaps if he had meant that, graduate mothers, or rather graduate parents, would be able to afford more, to bring in more opportunities for their children, and then so the children's, their kids would be able to get into universities and graduate and beat the system, okay, I'll accept that. But not purely on the
that
scientific.
point was made. Among the argument is that graduate mothers and fathers have better capability of bringing up the children. I think on the part of the gene, it is still a debatable issue. Until now, there is no
Exactly.
absolute conclusion about
So
it.
I would think, I never knew PM Dex, the late PM Lee as, the active politician. I knew him as the minister mentor, the senior minister, and as an individual independent entity on its own. So, and I knew him as someone who was smart, witty, and very usually accurate. But for him to make such a mistake was just something that I could not understand.
And it's, I guess, what people were concerned about or are upset about in this is the decision, the consequence of the decision is irreversible to those who have been affected. I guess that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Thanks.
I
Subra.
think to take up your point, his convictions were deeply entrenched in lots of research he did. For example, he read Arnold Toynbee, he read Gunnar Myrdal and so on.
That's right.
All of whom gave him the seeds for that sort of philosophy.
It validated the
It
argument.
validated his arguments, and he was so deeply entrenched in his convictions that he was not prepared to think otherwise. That is my feeling. And I personally know it because working in the tax department, I had a lot of flack from taxpayers who came complaining to me, why am I discriminated against a graduate mother, and so on.
Okay.
So I had lots of problems in those years, in the 80s, in the late 80s and early 90s. And
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, if I could just switch gears a little bit, I'd like to go to something that's related to this. It's about the Malay Muslim community in Singapore, right? Now, he said this. He said, to have people believe all children were equal, whatever their race, and that equal opportunities would allow all to qualify for a place in a university must lead to discontent. The less successful would believe that government was not treating them equally. You see, again, the motivation is we have to accept that not everyone is equal, and somehow that's linked to genes, right? So we need to make sure that you give a leg up to people who are struggling. So you see, the intention was always to give people equal opportunities, right? And then that's where all this motivated him, to tackle the problem of the Malay underachievement. And he was very open about it. The Malay community is underachieving by his standards, right? Therefore, we need to give them a leg up, help. And Mendaki was formed in 1982 with precisely that mission to help the Malay community, right? Now, the then DPM S. Rajaratnam was opposed to the idea because he was a strong advocate of Malaysia, Singapore, and he said that he was opposed to it because he said it was not, it's breaking up society back into communal lines. And Lee Kuan Yew's response to that was, while I shared Raja's ideal of a completely colorblind policy, I had to face reality and produce results. From experience, we knew Chinese of Indian officials could not reach out to Malay parents. Chinese or Indian officials could not reach out to Malay parents and students in the same way that their own community leaders could. Again, very pragmatic solution, and subsequently on the same premise, SINDA was formed in 1991 and so on. So, this whole concept of multiracialism versus doing the right thing for people who he saw as having very different genetic, biological makeup, you see, which then went on to him saying that we need to maintain the racial proportions. But 75% Chinese because they are very economically driven. Chinese are money-minded, and then you say we need to maintain a certain proportion, about 14% or so of Malay, and about 7 to 9% of Indians. The right mix. Again, it's all linked, right? Genetics as well as all this. So now, Siong Seng, I'm going to ask you this question. You were your immediate past president of Chinese Chamber of Commerce. There are language issues that came up here as well. And you are aware that in 1963 or around that time, the Chinese Chamber had actually suggested to the then PM Lee that Mandarin should be made the key language in Singapore, not English, since majority of Singapore. But it was Lee Kuan Yew as Prime Minister who persuaded them otherwise and said, no, we must have English, the neutral language, as the lingua franca. And we all know the easy option, if you are a popular politician, what's the option? Go for your 75% votes. That would have been the easy thing to do. So why do you think, at one point you represented the Chinese business community. What's the sensibility here? SS.
I think you're right. If we would have, taken the easy way out to agree to this, then I think you're going to create an even more imbalanced society. Because already the Chinese are, at that time, better off in terms of economy. greater in numbers, and also there's this linkage still, I believe at that time, in the 60s to China. He wanted to make it very clear that Singapore is not the third China, all right? And I think it takes a lot of courage and to persuade then the Chinese chamber leaders who in the colonial days were fighting for the rights of Chinese citizen, in terms of citizenship, in terms of identity. They almost represent, they almost are the government. In fact, I know that one of the Chinese chambers leader contested against him in this Tanjong Pagar, Mr. Lan Tian. All right. So I think it took a lot of courage for him to talk to Chinese chambers, and so it was two-sided. It was double-edged how he handled it, and I think he did it very well. In fact, he came to open the Chinese chamber building in 1963. He came and opened it. So I think it took a while to even I think that the Chinese community trusts him, because they always think that he's not Chinese educated, and he really make it a point until the last days of his life he was still learning Mandarin, and he admitted he has to learn Hokkien to go and contest.
Yes.
So I think now you look back, I think it was the right thing to do, because the most important thing is not to encourage, he called it the Chinese chauvinism, because it was very easy to do that. And I think at the hindsight, I think it was right. And I'm glad that the Chinese chamber leaders at the time could see this point and supported it. Because it would have let Chinese be the dominant language, then the next Hokkien will say, I want Hokkien to be the dominant language. Because in Chinese chamber, half the seats are Hokkien. Right? So I think now you look back, even now, during my term, I broke out the election by clan. Right? No more Hokkien, even Teochew or what. So I think we are progressing, but at that time, it was a very tricky situation. So I think he did the right thing. And now you look back, I think I must also praise my leaders in the chambers at that time to have agreed to this.
And in addition, at that time, the Chinese community in Singapore were already frustrated by the closing down of Chinese schools, right? So there was already that frustration, and how do you think the Chinese community managed that frustration? Because there was a sense of betrayal as well.
I think what has happened is that the Chinese school actually were closed out, I believe, only in the
later.
I am much older than that.
Yeah.
I think in maybe Kenny is younger, in the early 80s or the late 70s.
Early 70s. Actually.
Early 70s. And I think what he realized is that by having a Chinese school, again, you are creating a group of very special students. The people who send the children there are either from the working class or businessmen who want to make sure that the children, go to a Chinese school. So actually you create a gap. Those who want to be civil servant, professional will go to English school, right? So you have a gap. So by closing it down and having the SEP school, I think at that time it was right. But of course it was it wasn't very popular. But I think part of the Chinese community were against it for different reasons, right? But now you look back is that the SEP school was the right thing to do. But in his later part of his life, in fact when he was 84 years old, he realized that by having SEP school wasn't enough, that we could actually become less relevant in terms of our positioning to China. And he formed Business China at the age of 84. Realized that how we actually have to strengthen the bilingual and bicultural group of students. And so I think by having that, he realized that even with the SEP school, it's not enough.
Right.
We have to do more. So I think it's always evolving, and I think it was important that we do not let the Chinese language or culture be the dominant one. Yeah, even though we are greater in numbers. Even in Chinese chambers, frankly, sometimes I have to stop my fellow council member who speaking Hokkien in front of the Teochew. I think there's this still root of when they get together to speak their own dialect. That's something I think we have to eradicate and make sure that we speak the same language that other people understand.
Right. Thanks. Yes, Kenny?
No, I was talking about the Chinese school. I think they closed down the Chinese school at the late 1970s because I was kind of a last batch of those kind of things. So when I went to Chinese high school, you're supposed to accept school, so we supposed to start the bilingual kind of system. If I remember correctly, the intake of the students to Chinese school was getting smaller and smaller. You will die by natural cause anyway. So with closing down officially or not closing down officially, it will happen in this manner. Because I remember my father sent some of my brothers and sister, they went to English school. But after that, I saw my brothers keep on playing basketball, and then my sister did not really, want to listen to him. I'm the youngest. He sent me back to the Chinese stream. So I understand the situation down there, and I'm glad that actually I benefited a lot from our bilingual system. I know it's very difficult. I know at the point of time that I have to learn both languages and all thing, but after a while, after the struggle, eventually what the whole system benefits, individual who master 2 languages, you can go to China easily, and you can travel the rest of the world with the English. So I think this is some things that I think Singapore actually succeed better than many countries. If I look at some of my counterpart in Malaysia, some of the Chinese out there, not necessarily they can master both languages. Maybe they can master 3 languages, but not equally balanced.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Might be slightly better
One
in Malay,
stronger,
but
yeah.
their Mandarin with the accents and with the certain kind of sounds, I don't know. And then English is okay. It's on par with us. So I think there are a lot of debate in terms of bilingual system. I think Singapore is one of the slightly more successful one. But sad to say that nowadays some of the younger parents, they want to skew towards only English, and then they start speaking less mother tongue to their children. I don't know whether happened in Indian family, but I look at my nephews and nieces.
I'll tell you what's happening in many Indian families. Many of the Indian parents are getting the children to study Mandarin. Yeah. No, and you see, so the whole point is defeated, because if the point is for you to understand your own mother tongue as in your culture, again, the assumption here is that culture comes through the mother. It's such a sexist kind of notion.
I guess the Indian family are even more pragmatic than LKY.
No, we are becoming pragmatic.
more.
We used to be just fractious and contentious, but now we are becoming pragmatic. Yes.
Yeah, there's one thing that I don't really understand in this whole thing as the debate progresses. Because if you really felt that different racial groups have different talents or like different IQs, then why did he still embrace the idea of meritocracy? Because I feel that meritocracy just assumes that everyone has a level playing field so that they can get equal opportunities. But if that isn't the case, then does meritocracy really work for Singapore? And actually, on hindsight, I think maybe meritocracy did work for like the developing stages, but now I think that the level playing field is so unbalanced. Like for example, those who do well, they have better access to more resources, and then their kids end up doing even better.
Yep.
And those who don't do really that well, they go through the same system, but then their kids don't have the extra access to resources, and then it's a self-perpetuating cycle. So is meritocracy really good for Singapore, and especially when we believe in this whole multiracialism thing? Is there an inherent contradiction?
Yeah. Any comments on Vicky's point about meritocracy? We have about 10 minutes more, so we need to speed up. Quick comments.
Meritocracy works. I think a lot of us come from families whose parents did not do well in school, or education was not very important before Lee Kuan Yew came on board. My mom has said this. My mother, I'll just take my personal story. My mom has got primary 6 education. My father has got primary 3 education. Both of them do not speak English. But my mom, until today, in fact, when he passed away, she called me and she said, "Your stepdad passed away." Because she sees him as somebody who valued education and who made, not him alone, of course, him and his team, made the effort to help Singaporeans become progressive people. And for that, I must say, I am very grateful. But back to your point about this meritocracy causing problems in Singapore society.
And basically, Vicky was referring to meritocracy
and stratification.
Used to be the same as equal opportunities, but today with the median income going up, those who can afford have a natural advantage over those who can't.
I think the government has changed that. I've done some part-time lecturing for some time. I was teaching the ITE students. Half of my class were depressed because they felt that they deserved to be in the Polytechnic. However, the government has made it such that even if you're in ITE, you could go to Polytechnic and university. So I think the opportunities are there, and the self-help groups are doing what they can to give whatever resources. We are a country that rewards people for learning, regardless of your age, and I think that is a legacy of Lee Kuan Yew and his team that makes Singapore very different from most countries in the world.
That's true.
I just want to say that point.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, I agree with what she's saying. I grew up from a family. I don't have any much of an academic background, but I feel that I was being brought up in an environment that I have equal opportunities, and as of today, I feel that I am happy in whatever I have achieved, and I am very thankful for having this very stable environment that I could grow. So I would say that for any younger people, they could look at in the aspect that if you put enough hard work, you will be able to achieve much more later in life as well. Yeah.
May I also address the point? I think any society, right, there'll be some who are born more fortunate than others. And rather than meritocracy being an obstacle, I think what meritocracy does is it removes the obstacle that if you are not born in fortunate circumstances, you still, through your own ability, have the chance to rise.
And you know, I just looking at this interesting quote by LKY in the Singapore story, in memoirs. It struck me, he says, it struck me as manifestly fair that everybody in this world should be given an equal chance in life. An equal chance in life. That is a just and well-ordered, that in a just and well-ordered society, there should not be a great disparity of wealth between persons because of their position or status or that of their parents. Again, I think he was sincere about wanting this, right? And I think at that point when you introduced meritocracy, and many of us here are beneficiaries of the meritocratic system. You know, I know for a fact, Subra, I know you are. Many of us came from very poor families, and I managed to go to RI, you know, and my father, I remember, who was quite anti-PAP at that point in time because he was an avid supporter of the Progressive Party, you know. When he took me to RI as a 13-year-old boy to register, he looked at me and told me in my language, he said, "You must be thankful to Lee Kuan Yew, because without him, you wouldn't be coming here. Because if you were in India, this wouldn't have happened." And this is a man who was anti-PAP and anti-Lee Kuan Yew, who whispered to me in my language to say, "You have to be thankful to this man." This was in 1971, December. You know, so you see, some of these things we can't ignore, we can't forget. But how it later evolves, you can't put the blame on him. When he started it, it was a different Singapore. The question is whether he was able to adapt to the changed circumstances. Chandra? Any comment?
Absolutely. I think, you know, meritocracy overall, I think it's a fantastic thing. I'm actually foreign talent here. I was born in Kerala, same language as Vishwa, Malayalam. And I came here when I was 6, 7 years of age. But you know, I could see the progress made in terms of opportunities given. And I came from a very poor family too. My dad and mom both maybe primary 1, primary 2. My dad knew a bit of English, my mom not at all. She was completely deaf. But she told me, look, this, from what you can see of as we progress in the 60s and all, it's a good system. There's opportunities for you, and make the best of it. I mean, we had no tuition at all those days. I think most of us never had tuition, you know. It was a new thing in the 70s. But the opportunities were there, and the multiracialism, because the class consists of all kinds of students, from the rich, very poor. I had a lot of gangster friends actually, and you learn all the sign languages. Now I'm involved in detaining some of these people, or in reviewing the detention, you know. But overall, I think there is, but like Vishwa says, maybe society has transformed, and it's for us to try and bring it back to just purely meritocratic, but we are being idealistic. But you've got to be an idealistic fool to progress in life. You know? So I think overall it's good.
We can take maybe 2 or 3 quick comments or questions, and then we'll have to start wrapping. Yes. Yes, please.
I just want to say on meritocracy, if you just look across the causeway, which is a completely diametric policy. Unfortunately, I have a lot of relatives still in Malaysia, and they complain about how that has resulted in a whole system of patronage and entitlement with just one race, and it has not bred any form of loyalty to the country. And so I think definitely with the swaths of foreign talent trying to come into Singapore, it just shows what opportunity there is.
Anyone else? Yes.
But I actually like to ask a different question. Mine is about, in terms of policy considerations, the other thing apart from pragmatism that's always been mentioned, that is, I think, part of the late PMD's legacy is on Asian values, and how Asian values must always factor in to temper the democratic ideals. My question is, how much of those Asian values were clear to the people around him that they share the same understanding of Asian values as he did, or was it just driven by his own understanding of what Asian values are and when they should be applied? And for the future of Singapore, will we still see the invocation of the term Asian values as a way to counter some Western criticism of how policies are shaped and how the country moves forward?
I'll ask the ambassador to comment on this. You have had to deal with Asian values in Russia quite a bit.
I had to deal with a lot of Russian values. But with regard to the general subject of the discussion, I was a teacher at one time in school, and I've had pupils in my class whom I thought were absolutely useless. And later on in life, I found that they have been successful. And why is it that such things happen? This meritocracy also depends on the effort of the individual to take advantage of the circumstances. I'll give you another example. Take Seng, for example. He comes from a very poor background, absolutely peasant sort of background. And at some time, our paths met when I was teaching at the Maga, which is adult education, and he was there working himself. He has apparent reason to the school, and he was trying to help himself. And he was working for his A and O levels. And at another stage in life, I found that he was in the Ministry of Defense, and I sat with Gokings and him to discuss adult education programs for the military. And later on in life, I found that I was an MP and he was a minister. So it is wonderful how things happen like that, But I think it must be some people who have the ability to recognize chances and take the opportunity.
Any comment on the Asian values point, which is very core to striking the balance between Asian values and not losing out on the opportunities globally, right? And he's often, somebody described him, I can't remember, someone described him as being white inside and yellow outside.
Yeah, what's that? Banana.
Banana, right? He's described as a
That's
banana. Who was it? Sorry?
The Western-oriented gentleman.
Yes.
Maybe on the Asian value, can I say, because my father is 97, still come to work every day, and maybe one thing about LKY is that you listen to his speech. He say, crush your enemy, don't let him live. That means push him to the end. But maybe for the Chinese, it's live and let live. All right. So, but I think later part in life is changing, right? So I think the Asian value that he has, well, for certain part he use it, but not everything, right? But as the Asian value also is changing. So I guess in the earlier part of life he was very, very hard, push you to the ground and crush you. I don't think Asia do that. all right? But maybe he doesn't even want to take the chance of live and let live. Right?
Asia is more crouching tiger.
Yeah, crouching tiger, right? Yeah, but I think it's changing, you know, so, yeah.
I think for the Malays, the major element in the Asian value is collectivism, the communitarian spirit. This is where in the world of meritocracy, apart from meritocracy, you have equal opportunity, then you also have meritocracy with heart. This is where the communitarian spirit is being transformed.
The compassionate meritocracy.
Yes.
Yeah.
You see, if Mendaki was formed by the government, managed by the civil servant, it will not succeed. Because there is no element of passionately involved in driving the programs and helping those in need of help to be successful. But you see, we collect money together, thanks to the government for allowing the check-off system be made, that Malay workers can contribute through CPF check-off system.
Right.
Mendaki has the money, and I think from a small organization it becomes very effective in helping the less fortunate. This is where we thought, to answer your question, those who are successful can be self-propelling. They can be more successful on their own. But for those who are less able, that is where the community effort via Mendaki can come together. And in Singapore, education is the sole mobility for the society.
To level
off.
Yeah.
So until now, even though we are talking about Singapore becoming more and more stratified, but I think education is still a major force in the leveling effort.
Thank you. Chandra, quick comment?
I agree. I mean, Asian values and Western values, sometimes a bit of sometimes I wonder what it is. I think in all human beings we have a combination of these values, communitarian spirit and all, yes, but is it really Asian? Sometimes I wonder, as the years go by, it's a bit of a mishmash, and I think it gets mixed. Even like when we talk about, you know, corruption, etc., these are all, I think, universal values. Some nations do it better than others, and we have done extremely well in that department because of certain individuals. And I wouldn't say it's just LKY. I think it is the people also. It's the civil service, the police force. Of course, you need the leadership. You know. So, to answer your question, I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I don't like to label whether it's Asian values, is it North or South or West. At the end of the day, it's all
human values.
It's human values, I think. You know,
you want to say that?
Important thing. You know.
Yeah. Okay, Joe. Now we're going to have one. I'd like each one of the panelists to say in one line or one sentence, a quick comment of what you think is the most compelling idea you have about LKY. It doesn't have to be positive. Yes, Joe. Just quick comment.
I think Lee Kuan Yew would not have been happy with the title of today's discussion. You said one line, so I give you one line.
He would. So, is it because he doesn't like to be understood? Certainly, he would like to be misunderstood.
You see, he wants to be trusted. He wants to feel that he's got people believing in him.
In faith. In faith. Have faith in him, but not necessarily having to understand him. Have faith that I'm doing the right thing. I don't need to explain. And to a large extent, and I think you're absolutely right, the first few decades, it was blind faith. People just, even my parents, you know, if Lee Kuan Yew says so, it must be so, right? It was that sort of a mantra. It was that kind of faith. It's so hard to earn because he delivered, right? But the cachet of that expires after some time, and I think that's the challenge. Chandra.
I think LKY was a great leader. I think we are very lucky to have a leader like that. It will take a long time before another one appears on the scene, but it was during that time you can't but progress. And today it is more difficult for Hsien Loong. It was not so easy for Goh Chok Tong. So it's a time and place actually. And I think he had a team of dedicated people. It was not the money, nothing. It was a dedication to serve society. And I think he could have done it with a bit more compassion, a bit more kindness, a bit more fair play. And I think then he would have been a statesman. a lot of people say he's a statesman and all, but I think when you go into the real nitty-gritty of statesmanship, I think there is some room for improvement.
Right, thanks. Yatiman.
In Malay, there's a saying, when you hold the burning ember, hold it until it becomes charcoal. Genggam bara api, biar sampai jadi arang. You want to do something, you do it until you achieve it. That is a lesson we learn, and from a very great man that Singapore is fortunate to have. We have to wait for another century to have that kind of man.
Thank you.
Well, for the last 1 week, I think people tend to know him better. People turn out in crowd, know the softer side of him. So I think from his love to his wife, to his family, and to the country, I think you cannot fault him. And even the Chinese say the day he was, when the funeral started, it rained. And they say that normally LKY function it doesn't rain. His leaders told me, grassroots leaders. So even the sky rains. So what we say is 风光大壮. It is a grand funeral. So I think he's a great man for the country.
Thank you. And I guess my privilege is to have the last word. In 1959, July 21st, his very first speech in the Legislative Assembly as Prime Minister, he said something that's very interesting. He said, "This is a government consisting of people who put their ideas, their ideals, and the welfare of their people above themselves." This was in 1959. "This is a party which has the courage of its convictions, which is prepared to pursue what it believes to be right in the interests of the people, and without deviating for opportunistic reasons. This will be an era which will light up the dark pages of the history of Singapore, post-1945. Now, if you look at it, if I look at it, to a large extent, he has been consistent. He has been consistent, and therefore the party had been consistent, now has been consistent. And it is not an easy task, what has been achieved. You're talking about 61 years of consistency. There are obviously deviations from the consistency, but that makes him human. And I'm glad he is human, because he's not without warts. For me, the thing that is most appealing about LKY is that he is not perfect. Therefore, we should not judge him as a perfect person. We should judge him as a human being with flaws. And he himself admitted that he has his flaws, and he's prepared to be judged. And I think some interesting comments have come through, different perspectives have come through, and my final point here is, we wouldn't be here talking about the man in this place, this time and age, if he hadn't done some things right. And I hope this discussion has given us a little bit more insight, not so much to pay tribute to the man, but to understand the path that he led. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening, and thank you, audience. This has been an interesting and illuminating discussion, and I'd like to thank all of you. So that leaves me to say a big thank you to the four gentlemen who have kindly taken time off from their busy schedules to be here with us. Thank you very much, panelists. And of course, the wonderful audience. You've really raised some very interesting questions. I'm so sorry that not all of you have had the chance to raise your questions or comments. Well, do not let the debate end here. Log on to our website, www.inconvenientquestions.sg, and join in the discussion. Don't forget to like us, even if you don't like us that much, on Facebook, and watch our previous debates on our YouTube channel. Remember, you ask, they answer, and we make it happen. This has been IQ, Inconvenient Questions.